One, two, three, action. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're listening to us. Maybe it's night. I'm Alex. This is the Lost Souls podcast, and today is 420. And in the spirit of 420, we're going to talk about drugs and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of drugs, because they're not all good, they're not all bad, and there's a lot of wiggle room in between, because there's a very wide range when somebody says a drug, because an ibuprofen is as much a drug as heroin. Now, they're different levels, they're different kinds of drugs, but they're both things that are manufactured in some way, shape, form, or fashion that you put into your body. And at the same time, things don't even necessarily have to be manufactured to be considered drugs. They just have to be something which alters your body somehow. And so, because medicine falls in the same line, but the line gets tricky there, and I'm going to get into that at some point. But first and foremost, what drugs are meant to do is help people, right? I think that when you hear the word drug, it's got a really negative connotation just off the bat, right? Because especially like where I'm from, because like opioids and shit, like you hear drugs and you're like, oh, bad, that's bad. And so you develop an attitude that's hard on it, or not understanding of it. And the issue with drugs is they're a thing. They're a thing that people use. They're a thing that people have. And you can't just blanket code them like, oh, they shouldn't exist. And you also can't say that strict regulation of drugs works, because there are black markets. When there are drugs available, people want drugs. Drugs make people feel better. All kinds of drugs. I mean, speaking personally, I guess I shouldn't here to say this. I'm on mood stabilizers. Those help me. I do better with those. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about. People want things that make them feel better. And I don't necessarily mean like that makes them feel high. Right? You take, like, people. I take blood pressure medicine too, because apparently I'm very unhealthy when it comes to stress and all that stuff. Because I feel better when my blood pressure is lower. You know? People take a lot of drugs just to feel better, because there are things we can do to help ourselves feel better, right? And as it turns out, when we have issues, maybe we should try to fix them. You know, you don't have to suffer through everything. Now, a lot of stuff you do, but you don't have to suffer through everything. You can fix things. You know, if something bothers you, you can do something about it. Most of the time. Not all the time. Maybe half the time. Let's not get into the exact percentages, because it's different for everybody, and I don't know. But the drugs can help, right? But you also enter territory where it's not just medical reasons you use drugs, or not just strictly medical, because the issue with saying it's medical is, oh, well, you need a prescription. Okay, well, if you need a prescription, then you need a doctor to sign off and say, hey, they need this. Somebody needs this. It's something which helps them, right? Which is all fine and dandy, except I'm not the kind of person who thinks other people should be in control of how I live my life. I want to be free. I want to feel free. It's kind of half my thing. And I don't feel free when I got to go through institutional authorities in order to get things that I think help me, right? Whenever you put barriers between what people need and how they get them, and sort that out through some authority figure who is biased in some way to some company, some organization, and isn't first and foremost centered on somebody's individual health and the relationship between patient and doctor, provider, right? Because when you seek help and assistance, it should be specifically and only to serve the person seeking assistance in whatever situation. You shouldn't sit there and have to consider how insurance is going to affect this. You shouldn't have to sit there and consider how your boss is going to think about it, because all of these, while I understand that there are checks in place to try to prevent abuse and problems and corruption, number one, those things happen anyway. And number two, they actually, in my opinion, prevent people from getting the kind of care they need. I noticed my headphones, they look awful. I'll have to fix that at some point. But hey, here we are. Oh no. Okay. There I am about medicine, right? Medicine it's great when you take it. If it's what helps. If it's not what helps, then I don't know what to tell you. Find something else. There is something. If you have problems, if you genuinely have problems, I don't even mean just like mental problems. I mean like I sweat a lot. Okay? I sweat a lot. I mean a lot. I take medicine to try to help that. See, this is what I mean, is if there's something going on with you, you can fix that. It just, there are barriers to that, and I don't like the fact that there are so many barriers. Yes, this mug's broken. No, I don't care. It's what I had this morning. But in the same vein of people trying to reach out and seek drugs to make them feel better, this is where you enter into recreational territory, because now, yes, it can make people feel better, but you're also entering into places where it's like, well, I'm taking drugs to actually like enhance my experience. And that's the difference, right? Medical drugs get taken to improve a person's well-being, a person's life, and how they live their life, right? Recreational drugs are taken in order to enhance the life that's already there, right? And that's where I personally see the line getting drawn. You know, if you're doing it just to enjoy life better, just to enhance what's already there, then you're recreationally taking it. If you're taking it because, well, if you're taking it because it's what you feel you need to be okay, or what you know where you probably see where I'm going with this at this point. If you're taking it as an attempt to solve a problem, right, then it's medical. Now, I'm not saying that you can find other ways. I've struggled with stuff like that before, because, you know, like, I'm talking about 420, I'm talking about pot, right? Because there are times, and have been times in my life, where pot is what I use to help cope, right? It's a coping mechanism, right? Because it helps on some level, and I'm saying it doesn't harm more than it helps, especially not long term, but that's why you seek stuff out. Because some people, like for me, and I guess I should speak from personal experience and let people come to their own conclusions for it, right? And especially like for the longest time, because I'm only now getting to a place in my life where I have some clarity, right? Because my ass was bipolar, it didn't fucking realize it anyway, or didn't get treatment for it. And so part of the reason I used to smoke pot, or I still smoke pot, because it's not like I stopped. I tried. That shit doesn't work for me right now anyway. I need more stability in my life to really give that shit up entirely, even though I go through my spells where I'm like, I'm done. Like, you know, like everybody does, like with anything, you know. That's not just pot. That's, you know, that's the other half of it, is people use all kinds of things to numb. Sex, right, functions in the same way some of this stuff does, but, or even like anything, right, anything can function in this way as long as it's a distraction, makes you feel better. And even most of the time it's reaching out in a bad way. I won't go into too many examples, but like for me, right, when I was going through like bipolar shit, like you go through depressive episodes, they get real fucking bad. I mean, super bad. And sometimes it helped to smoke it because it brought some joy into those really, really, really dark moments. Now, do they always help? No. Sometimes I'd smoke pot and I'd start crying like a baby, because it's like it allowed me to release the things, because it helped me feel the emotions better. Because especially when you're that bad off, when you're so depressed that the world around you feels like it's awful, and anything helps. You'd seek any relief or comfort that there is. And I do a lot better with it than I used to. I mean, oh my God, you don't want to know. You don't want to know the extent of it, honestly, because I mean, you don't tell people about that stuff. And yeah, I could be open and honest about it, but there's no point in dragging everybody down that far. You know, the point I'm trying to get at is the line's blurry, And even recreational drugs and other things can be used as coping mechanisms to help people through times, right? Through dark times. Or whatever the issue comes when those things linger longer, right? Because I'm not acting like there's not a problem with it. I'm not acting like people don't, lean on the stuff too hard. You can lean on anything too hard. I drink caffeine every morning. I lean on it too hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a drug. It's a drug that it's okay. Like, you can drink all the caffeine you want, nobody bats an eye. I mean, I'm serious, because it almost on some level makes our country go round and round, Would it be recreational? Or if you need it to wake up every morning, if you need it to get going every morning, if you're one of those people who don't talk to me before, or like, don't talk to me before I've had my coffee this morning, is it really recreational, or are you using it for medical purposes? Are you using it to cover up the fact that you have trouble sleeping at night, or the fact that you're tired, or the fact that you don't want to keep going as much like you do anymore? Is that what you're going for? Because if so, I'd probably argue it's more medical than recreational. Although you don't classify caffeine like that, even though, why shouldn't you? Something you put into your body. What do you use it for? If you're doing stuff, why are you doing it? That's the thing people like run up into and have issues with. You want to focus on the thing people do so bad, right? You want to look at what people do and you want to say, oh my God, that's what that means, right? When you're not looking at the layers underneath, and the only person who can answer those questions is you. Nobody but you actually knows why you're doing the stuff you're doing, and you got to be honest with yourself to find out, right? You really got to sit with yourself and be like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? Because most of the time when you're doing stuff and it's like, why am I doing this? You're actually trying to meet some kind of unconscious need, right? That isn't being met. And so your subconscious is kind of like, okay, we're gonna kind of like push you toward this, and you're not going to realize it. Because here's what people don't realize that I've come to accept about the mind, is that you're not aware of a lot of it. You're not aware of most of what goes on in your head. Honestly, you're not. And maybe part of being human is trying to unpack that and figure out what all that is. Maybe that's just part of my experience. Maybe people, I know I can't speak for other people. Maybe people are super in tune with themselves and know exactly what they're thinking at all times and exactly what's going on in there. And there's, maybe that ain't me. And I'm not saying any of this to like throw down on recreational drugs. There are plenty of people who use recreational drugs, and I've got no problem with personally. I've always wanted to try hallucinogens, like LSD. Well, shrooms. I've always wanted to try shrooms, and I mean, like, I don't mean I've tried. It's probably not good to mention this, but who the hell is watching? And if it gets me in trouble, so be it. If I go to jail because I talked about this on some video on the internet, then bravo, you really tried to put me under. Somebody really tried to get me in trouble. But yeah, I tried shrooms once because I was like hoping it would help me, like with like depression and shit. And and they say don't do that because it's a bad trip. If I had shrooms right now, I would trip on them just to see what the hell happened, right? Because I want to know. I want to see what's behind the curtain. That's where I'm at. But no, it was just like it was like a mood enhancer, right? To where it would just take whatever I was feeling and amplify it by like 3 or 4. All right, so if I was happy, I was really happy, and if I was sad, I was really sad. And it was good and it was bad. I could see why people say don't take mushrooms if you're in a bad state of mind, because I could see a bad trip being super bad, especially if you took a higher dose than I took. I don't want to touch on LSD because that is a man-made chemical, but there's plenty of other stuff like ecstasy or whatever. People do all kinds of party drugs too. Alcohol is probably the most well-known and used recreational drug there is, even if we don't want to admit it. This is a hill I'll die on. People want to separate alcohol from other drugs. You're crazy if you think so. You're just fooling yourself if you think alcohol is any better than any other drug. In fact, it's probably one of the worst drugs out there for you. I would argue it's much worse for you than pot. And I know pot isn't great for you. It does mental things, but alcohol will kill your liver. Alcohol will put you... It's not good. right? I heard, okay, this is a saying I heard when I was in high school, right? And this is the kind of stuff that sticks me. All my time through school, right? All my time through school, I don't remember sitting in front of the textbooks. I don't remember like doing the worksheets or the problems. I mean, vaguely, I don't remember anything from them. I remember stuff that my teacher said to me that stuck, right? And those didn't happen that often. Usually I scribbled the quotes in the corner of my notebooks, right? If I could find them, I think I threw away half of them. I could find you a long list of just notes that I took, which were mostly just quotes that had nothing to do with the topic at hand from the professors as they were going on, or the professors or the teachers as they were going on, because I thought they were interesting enough to actually pay attention to, all right? And one of those things, I've never heard somebody getting high on smoking a joint and go beat their wife afterward. I mean, it's true. Alcohol breeds aggression. Pot doesn't breed aggression. So if you're looking as like a societal point of view for like how to prevent harm in people, but sometimes I think that maybe the idea of prohibition wasn't such a bad idea. I mean, it obviously didn't work, and I think that's because you get into trouble when you restrict people's ability to do stuff. But I think restricting and allowing people to do things is completely different from accepting it and saying it's acceptable, because what you do is you make alcohol acceptable, right? Society makes alcohol acceptable. And I'm not saying alcohol has been drunk for thousands of years, right? Or however long it's been drunk. It's a part of human history, right? That's probably part of the reason it sticks around like it does. But you cannot stand on that hill and say, well, alcohol is fine, and then look at other drugs and say, but they're the bad ones, right? Because the only thing you're doing is using groupthink to not even consider the topic at hand and say, well, everybody says alcohol is good, so it must be good. That is your shorthand, because if you actually looked into it, you would not have these opinions, right? And I mean, that's my opinion. I'm pretty sure it's pretty right on the nose, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. And then you get into the dark side of drugs, right? Because it's not just recreation and trying to have a good time or helping people cope with things. There's the dark underbelly, the black markets that arise because there is a want for drugs that is not being met in the economy, right? Because people want it and people will pay for it, and as long as people want it and people are pay for it, it's gonna exist. Right, that's part of the issue with like criminalizing everything. Yeah, I don't think you should be allowed to deal drugs, right? But regardless of where it exists, it's gonna exist. And the difference between allowing it and not allowing it is whether or not it gets taxed or not. And I'm all for cutting some taxes on people. I'm all for cutting taxes on the poor. But it's unsafe. It's unsafe, right? This is the other thing, is when things are on the black market, they're not regulated, they're not tested, they're not controlled in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And yeah, I'm sitting here talking about how things don't need to be controlled, but you can have quality assurance tests, right? And I'm not saying that the government should sling meth, although it did sling coke, didn't it? And, it's just going to exist. And unless the only way it's not going to exist is if it's completely legalized. And I mean just pot, I mean all of it. And I'm not saying you should go legalize everything. I'm just saying that if it exists, there's going to be a black market. And you got to accept that reality. And people get addicted. And black markets, more so than other markets, benefit from having people stay stuck in a cycle of addiction and use, right? Having people stay stuck, always wanting more, right? They benefit from keeping people bought into the system. They benefit from giving people just enough to have the breadcrumbs to come back, because they need to rely on the repeat customers to keep themselves afloat, right? I mean, I guess all businesses kind of work like this, but with the black market, it's more pervasive because you've got drugs, which people are really addicted to, and you're handing them out to people, right? Of course, people are going to keep coming back, right? Of course, they're going to keep coming back. And it's not always so easy to just quit the stuff. I mean, this ties into like the whole opioid crisis that's been going on in America, because one of the things that actually happened right? This is what actually happened. It was people got hurt. People get hurt working hard labor. That's what happens. And in places, and back in like coal country where I'm from, people went to coal mines. People worked in coal mines. That kind of work hurt people. That kind of work damaged people. That kind of work left people with chronic pain, right? And then you have these medicine companies which go on there and they push pills, they push opioids, some of the most addictive drugs on the market because of how good they make people feel. And say, here, you can take this for pain, right? And so they hand them out like candy and say, here, take these. These are the new thing. These are new things. They'll help you. They'll help you. They'll help you. And they do help people. They help people enter in another world. And then people get used to that. And it's okay at that point because it's being prescribed by doctors, right? At the behest of pill companies. But it's okay. It's acceptable as long as it's funneled through the proper channels. But there came a point where what was realized that these drugs were being abused because of what they were. Right? They were being bought and sold, and people were going through their whole supply and going through and had to, get it from other people, and started this whole thing because it was an opioid that was extremely powerful. You wouldn't hand somebody morphine and then expect them to use it responsibly. You know what I'm saying? There's a reason that something like that exists only in hospitals. And it isn't because, necessarily that people shouldn't have drugs. It's because the risk of it being abused is way too high because it makes people feel way too good. Right? It's used to treat heavy injuries so that after surgeries, you're not in total and complete pain. Right? Of course you're going to get used to that. And at some point, this whole issue was realized. And what happened? Well, doctors started cutting off their patients, right? In part because they were doing other shit on the side, and in part because it was just getting to be a problem. And slowly this started happening, right? To where people were addicted to opioid painkillers that you can't just go off of, right? You can't just quit them cold turkey. There are dangerous withdrawals which happen because of that. Right. I don't know if it could kill you, but it might. It's rough, right? And so what do? So you're somebody who just got cut off from their pain pills. You've been on pain pills for 2 or 3 years, right? You're going through the worst withdrawals of your life. You literally feel like you're going to die. Are you going to suffer it? Or are you going to go find some relief? And a lot of people decided they were going to go find some relief. I'm going to go here, and I know somebody who had them before. They also had a script, so why don't I go see if they'll let me get a few off them, right? And so then that's how the black market starts slowly, right? Because at first it's just the opioids. At first it's just the pills, but then the pills get too hard to get a hold of, so you start switching to other stuff, right? That's why right now in the area I'm from, there is a meth problem. Why? Because meth is easy and cheap to produce. Illegal as shit, but easy and cheap to produce. And it gives people that same high that they're seeking, right? There's at some point, it stops being about the drugs that people are using and what's happening underneath, right? And so what's the solution? Well, some people say it's addiction counseling. Get these people into counseling. Oh, well, you get them on Suboxone or some other drug, which is just a step down that you say is an acceptable form of pain management, right? And you tell them to keep going with that, even if it doesn't help, and eventually you're hoping to get them off of it through counseling because you think counseling's going to help matters. But, you take a step back and you look at the area and you look at what else is going on at the same time. Jobs are leaving the area. Money's leaving the area. The place looks desolate and empty, and there's no money. There are no jobs, and it starts to look like there's no hope for anybody. People are poor. People are struggling left and right. And on top of that, you've got a drug addiction. The world looks pretty bleak. And what are you going to do to fix it? You're going to do more drugs. That's your solution to the problem. And the answer is not totally just to convince everybody that the drugs aren't the solution, right? Because, yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could try that. But if that was going to work, people would probably realize it. Have you told an addict that it's not, the solution? Do you think even if you told them in the best way possible that they would listen to you? No. What do you need to offer instead? In an environment in which they might feel like the drugs are not the only option, right? Because a lot of these people who end up like that have been completely left by their families. They're people who were in the jail system, who go into jail, come out and don't have anybody, and end up going right back in because there's nowhere else for them. They get institutionalized, right? A lot of these people, have been doing it so long, but that's all they know. Because there isn't some kind of off-ramp for them. Once you get a drug charge, people really don't hire you. Once you get a drug charge, it's hard to even get housing. Once you get a drug charge, it's hard for you to do much anything in the world except go back to jail, right? And feed into the system of incarceration, which is another thing which is awful and, I don't really want to get into, but all ties into it, right? Because you send people to jail because they're addicted to drugs. You force them through withdrawals, separate them from any sense of family or community except the people in jail who are also on this, right? So now their only connections are the people they're making in jail. So when they get out, their connections are still those same group of people. They fall back in with them because they're the only people they know. And the cycle repeats itself. And, if you wanted to stop it, you could try, but it's what you've created. You've created this self-perpetuating system. I don't mean you as a specific person. I mean, either this was orchestrated by some master group of people trying to make money, which I guess is somewhat possible, or the system itself is self-sustaining to the point to where it's gotten out of control. Because money is at the center of it, right? That's the issue. They say money is at the root of all evil. The issue is that we optimize for money, right? There's not a point at which we say, well, that's enough money. Right? There's not a point where we stop and say we're doing fine enough, right? It's always more, it's always bigger, it's always expanding, right? There isn't a level to where it's just okay to exist. It's, well, we're making money, but we need more things, and so we need more money, and so how do we get more money? And we do it by doing this, and it's this whole web where that doesn't have to be one person, one group of individuals who's necessarily behind it, but the whole system can be corrupt simply because what it doesn't do is put human beings first. You know what I'm saying? Because if we put human beings first in society and what we did, we'd start to realize that the money isn't as important as we think it is, right? We need money because we're told we need money, and we created a world in which we need money. Does that make sense? Like, money is not a necessary thing, totally, right? It's useful for like exchanges, for stuff like that, and it goes crazy because what we've done is reduce things down to money, right? Which I've gotten off topic because we were supposed to be talking about drugs on 420, and somehow I get on another economic debate, which is where I always end up at. Oh my God. So, yeah, that's where I end up at. And I'm supposed to be talking about lost souls here. But see, this is for people. See, if you're listening to this, maybe you do get something out of it, because maybe you're the person who does drugs, or does some type of drugs, and maybe you don't understand or see exactly what's going on in the world. Maybe you're somebody who wants to know more about drugs and what the world of drugs is actually like, and not just the recreational part, but how it's used medically, how they're different, and how one size doesn't fit all. Right? Because there's nuance applied to each of these. For instance, right? Methamphetamines, meth, it's a stimulant, right? It's very similar to like regular like stuff they prescribe for people with ADHD medication. And so imagine what happens when somebody already has a problem, right, with drugs, but they're also ADHD, undiagnosed, right? They've got this mental problem that does have a solution that can help them. And they're taking a drug which almost exactly mimics the way that the actual treatment for that condition goes. Okay? Well, now what you've encountered is you've given somebody a dangerous drug which not only gets them high like they are wanting, but at the same time functions as in a medical sense to literally make their brain work better, to make their experience better on top of just being high. What do you do about that? I'm serious. What do you do about that? Because trying to convince a person like that to quit is like telling them the thing that helps them they can't have. Because I'm sure on some level, the reason that they're so caught up in it is because it does help on some level, right? It's not just the high. It helps them focus to some extent. It helps them do stuff to some extent, right? What do you do about that? You take that away from somebody? You take away some. I know there are pros and cons to everything, but things aren't always so simple. Things are not always so simple. They're like pot with somebody with depression who's super depressed, right? Do you take pot away from somebody who's super depressed and is smoking it because they are super depressed? And yeah, I know it's a self-defeat. You smoke pot and you end up more depressed because you keep smoking pot because you rely on it and you never deal with anything. That is true. That happens, right? But do you let somebody smoke that so that they're not worse off? These aren't easy questions. And I know the simple answer is, well, no, you shouldn't have people be on drugs. But the world isn't so simple as to exist like that. And you can't have an idealized world in which nobody's addicted to drugs. You can't have an idealized world in which these don't exist. And people are just always happy and people don't have issues. This is not real. This is not reality. This is a paradise which only exists in the minds of man. True paradise. I don't mean like a spiritual paradise. I mean like literal, like, it's hard to explain. I think paradise, the thing people search for at the end is just unity. What is if you're searching for an end, if you're searching for something which is eternal, in which everything good exists, right? Well, you're searching to exist within God, as I define God, which means you're seeking to reunite with God, right? Or the all. You're seeking to become one with everything once again. That's how I see it. Somehow I started talking about drugs and I inserted both of these into it. I wonder if that's going to be a theme. But I've babbled on long enough. So if you're watching this, I'm going to try to get this out on 420. It doesn't seem like it works any other way. So if you're watching this on 420, happy 420 if you celebrate, and if not, happy 420 anyway. It's still a day. You can celebrate it. It's because you don't smoke pot. You could still do whatever. You could still celebrate like a holiday. You could say, yeah, well, you could pretend to be a pothead if you really wanted to. This is an option you have in society, even though it's somewhat frowned upon. You can just pretend to be anybody you want for a little while. It's okay, right? It's all anybody does anyway. It's what people do when they go to work anyway. Pretend to be somebody else for a little while. Try it out if you want to. I'm going to try main character energy for a while. See how that fits me. Yeah. Maybe it'll help. I don't want to get delusional with it, though, but I'm always like, look, I realize how easily I can feed into my own delusions. So I'm constantly searching for ways to challenge things which could become delusional. I suggest you do the same as well. And I don't think you realize how easy it is for you to fall prey to stuff like that because we really like self-affirming our beliefs. We really like self-affirming our beliefs. But, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I hope your day goes well. I'm sending all the positive energy that I can send out there because, hopefully it reaches somebody. I don't have that much to give, but hopefully it reaches somebody. And, if you're out there having a hard time, just keep going. I wish I could tell you it gets better, and it does, I guess. It will at some point. Doesn't have much of an option, but that isn't much solace in the moment. So just keep going. And since this is just going to be an update about anything I do, you can stay tuned because I have a great idea. I'm not sure how I didn't think of it sooner. It actually puts together stuff in a better way than I was thinking. See, this is the thing. If you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, just do stuff until you figure it out. Because if you throw enough stuff at a wall, eventually something's going to pop into your head that puts it all together in a way that makes sense, right? Or that's how my brain works, right? I take all these different pieces of things I learn, all these different things I see and out in the world and what I do and all the skills I'm trying to build and whatnot. And then eventually my brain comes up with like some way to put everything together. And I'm like, oh, that's where I've been going this whole time. And this way you get to see my face, which is not the worst face in the world. Probably not the best either, but hey, it looks better with a beard though. But I've went on for long enough. Peace.